Hey there people of the internet, my name is Savannah and welcome to my studio. In today's video I have drawn the map for the Minichi region, finally. So while you watch this speed draw I'm going to talk quite a bit more about what's been going on and all my ideas for this game. Make sure you go watch my last video if you haven't already for a little bit of context, but the basic gist is I'm going to be making my own creature collector separate from Pokemon. Now let's just get into the drawing because it's a long one. So for anyone who doesn't know or is just tuning in and you haven't seen all of my Michigan Pokemon videos for the past couple years, I am making a region based on Michigan with a little bit of Texas because I live in Michigan and I'm originally from Texas, so these two places are very important to me. I'm not going to talk a lot about this first sketch because it eventually goes away, but basically I was trying to combine the shapes of Michigan and Texas and it just looks kind of weird because they're both weird, stupid shapes. But I play around with it for a little bit before I realize how dumb it looks. I really tried to make it work, but after finishing the sketch and adding like the base colors, I showed it to Victor and he was like, that looks weird. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. It shouldn't look like the real world maps of the states. I also cut out like 3 hours of me tracing and placing assets from Incarnate, which is a really good free map maker that I use a lot for D&D. And they have all of these assets for landforms like mountains and forests that I was going to use but decided against it when I finally realized that I could just get brush packs specifically for making maps. So I do that later when I get to the redraw, but for now enjoy this mess while I talk about Minichi things. So firstly, the name. Where does Minichi come from? It comes from a few different Ojibwe words like Nibi, which means water, Minis, or Minis, I don't know, which means island, and Michigan, which was originally called Michigami, or Michigama, which means Great Lake or Large Lake. So I just decided to combine all of those names into what I thought sounded good. It gets the Mini from Minis, the Ni and extra I at the end from Nibi, and has the CH from Michigan. I've been using a lot of Ojibwe words and culture and history for these designs because they were very prominent here in Michigan and in parts of Canada. So I want to use the native culture. I think it's really interesting and I want to pay respect to them. Next thing I want to talk about is the types. I'm still using a lot of Pokemon's types because, you know, they're just basic elements, but I am changing quite a few of them, and even adding a couple. So to start off, I'm going to list the ones that aren't getting a name change, which are Dragon, which I did want to change, but I couldn't think of a term that I liked better that fit what I was going for. I thought maybe the Ancient type, but I'm sticking with Dragon because dragons are very recognizable and a fantasy staple. The next one that isn't changing is Electric. I thought about changing it to Lightning or Storm, but electricity is a broader subject than those two and therefore covers more of the bases. Fire is fire, ice is ice, they needed no change. Same with water. Again, I considered changing them to like pyro, cryo, or cold, and then aqua, but fire, ice, and water are just really recognizable terms, and I wanted to keep them that way. Now time for the rest that all got changed, starting alphabetically with bug. I really struggled to come up with a term that included insects and arachnids and other arthropods, but none of them sounded good or fun or fit in line with the other names, but I didn't want to just keep it as bug, so it is now the insect type. I went with this over the generalized term bug, mostly because of Digimon and how they have the insectoid Digimon. So like all bugs or bug adjacent things are insectoid, but I also didn't want to just use the full word of insectoid. Look, this was complicated for me and I needed to move on. They're insect type now, get over it. Next is dark, and I kind of split it into two types, Void and Beast. Void is like the dark magic-y type, and Beast is the feral evil type, like from Pokemon lore. Beast is a new type, obviously, and they're like the feral monsters that are malicious and hard to tame. Like the opposite of normal, sort of. They're mostly normal animals, just a bit more beastly, or a lot more beastly. And Void is literally just darkness, which sort of segues into the next one, which is Fairy, that I changed to be the light type. So it's kind of a reimagining, but also just like a replacing of the Fairy type. I thought about calling it the magic type, but they're all magical and all kind of fae creatures, hence the name Phaezoan, so I thought the light type was a good addition, since they'd still be kind of kind and fun-loving critters, and now with light magic, opposing the dark magic. I also made light and void good against and weak against each other, because balance. Fighting is now combat, just a different word for the same thing. These are Phaezoan that are specialized for melee battles, and train their bodies with different techniques. Next is flying, which I just changed to wind because it felt more all-encompassing, and it's like one of the 4 base elements: water, fire, earth, and air. Wind is air, or air is wind, whatever, you get the point. Ghost is now spirit because I just like the term more. Spirits can be anything in folklore, but ghosts have become this spooky thing thanks to media. I just think spirit fits in more with what I'm going for. Grass is now plant because I don't know if you know this, but there are a whole lot more types of plants than grass. None of the grass types from Pokemon are even based on grass. Plant type is just better, objectively. Come fight me. Ground is simply changed to land because I like the term and visuals more. Like when you think of land, you think of like the soil, the mud, the dirt, and sand. Ground, to me, is synonymous with the floor sometimes. Like you'll be like, hey, pick that up off the ground, and it's carpet. Normal was tricky. I thought about removing it. And also, normal is just kind of a subjective concept, but in Pokemon it represents real-world animals or objects or things that don't really fit with any other type. So I've decided to change it to neutral. They don't have to be based on something real, but they are lacking any other element type. So I'm not going to be pairing them with anything else. Because the reason they're neutral is because they have no other type, so it wouldn't make any sense to have like a neutral and water type. They would just be water type. I hope that makes sense. It probably does. Poison is changed to toxic because poison is limiting. I'm pretty sure Loxton and Noggin has a video on this, but poisons and venoms are both toxins. There is also toxic waste and radiation and stuff, so toxic felt like the perfect umbrella term for all of those things. Psychic was going to be called mental or mystic or scion or something, but I decided on cosmic because a lot of my mons that are psychic type were aliens and or related to space in some way. They will still be super intelligent and have psychic powers, but they're now cosmic because I like space. Next is rock, which is changed to stone for a similar reason that ground was changed to land. It's a synonym, like rocks and stones are the same thing, basically, except you wouldn't call a gemstone or a crystal a rock, probably. And I just like stone being a type. Like many of my changes, it just feels like a more all-encompassing term. Last of the changes is steel, which is now metal type, because there are a lot more types of metals other than steel, and it's really just that simple. Now for the second new type. The first new type was beast, and now we have the sound type. Everyone loves and wants the sound type, so I just had to do it. There are so many sound-based animals in nature, meaning like it's a big part of how they live, like echolocation, mating calls, communication in general. Sound is important, so it is now a Phaezoan type. Now that I'm done with 3 full pages of type changes, I want to briefly talk about the changes I've made to the stats. So as you may have noticed in my last video, I made a dex layout template for my Phaezoan, and in the bottom left corner are their stats, which include health, which will probably be abbreviated to HP in the game menu, but yeah, it's their health, it's their hit points, how many points of damage they can take before they faint or are defeated. And of course, remember, these are just base stats. Next is power, which is the term I'm using for physical attack. Then we have armor, which is the physical defense against physical attacks. And at first I had changed the special attack stat to mana because I planned for it to determine both the special attack power as well as the mana pool that is the resource for using these special moves, but I determined that that was too confusing. So now it is just called magic. It will still determine the strength of these magical attacks as well as the mana pool, but now they have different names. Physical attacks or powers resource is going to be called energy. Mana and energy are not going to be their own stats, but instead are determined by the magic and power stats. Next is shield, and you may be wondering how that's different from armor. Well, think of it as a magic shield, to protect against magical attacks the way armor does against power moves. I was going to call it magic shield or M-shield for short, but that didn't fit in the layout and I didn't want to change it. I know I could have made it fit, but I didn't want to. I really like each of the stats only being one word. And shielding is a term used in the witches community that is a practice of shielding or warding off against harmful magic effects. I thought about calling it ward as I was writing the script, but I don't like that as much. And speed is speed. It determines how fast Phaezoan is and when they attack in the turn order, kind of like initiative, as well as their evasiveness. Also, again, none of these are final. They are just basically brainstorming ideas that I wanted to share with you all. Alright, let's talk about lore. So this game and its story are going to be all about the environment, which is another reason I wanted to change the map to look kind of more fantasy and not just Michigan and Texas smashed together, because then I can choose what biomes are where instead of trying to copy the real real-world states. So as you can see, the South is the South, the American Badlands, Flatlands, and desert regions like most of Texas, and then it naturally fades into short grassy hills, fields, and some forest before it turns into the more wooded area that is Michigan, because Michigan's got a lot of trees, guys. And the further north you go, it changes into a taiga, tundra, and then straight up Iceland. Okay, so plot. I don't want to give away too much, but in the beginning, you are this tamer, and you have just finished tamer school, and now you're going to see the professor who you are starting an internship with. And she wants you to go out and fill in these like assignments, these dex orders. I was thinking kind of like the Legends Arceus dex entries, like how you have to make a Pokemon use a certain move a number of times or whatever. Stuff like that, and see how they interact with and affect the environment. And while you're out exploring the world, you come across many different things, like all of these different cities, the quote-unquote gym challenges. I haven't decided on a name yet, but there are going to be like elite tamers that you battle to show your strength and to improve and to get different perks and access to more difficult areas. And along your journey, you're going to run into these two opposing factions that I will not go into too much detail until I draw stuff for their specific characters. But basically, one of the factions is called Frostbloom Foundation, and they are a nature activist, environmental activist, wanting to preserve the natural forests and wildlife preserves, stuff like that. They're great, I love them. But they kind of go to extremes when trying to protect the land. The next faction is a multi-million billion dollar corporation called Forge Industries, and they are like the industrial capitalists. They just want to keep expanding cities and technological human advancement, but in doing so, they also kind of go a little crazy and are like, what if we make our own creatures? What if we make our own Phaezoan artificial? So the game's plot and themes are based around natural versus artificial. Like, when does human advancement go too far? I really like the environment. I'm a tree hugger, so I wanted to do this. And of course, it's also going to be about bonding with your creatures, with the Phaezoan. There are going to be some like bonding mechanics to make them listen to you, like actual training instead of just XP farming. I don't have a lot of mechanics set in stone. I have nothing set in stone, basically, since I am just brainstorming and not actually developing the game yet, but I am super excited to start. Again, I will go over all of this in their own dedicated videos, as well as talk about these locations when they become relevant. I could talk about this probably forever, but I think I have to be done. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed my map and my ramblings. There will definitely be more to come as I develop the basis for my game. Let me know what you guys thought, what you think in the comments. Like, subscribe, ring the bell if you haven't already, and as always, take care and I'll see you in the next one.